Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Legal Lounge PH. So, this is our first ever video, and hopefully, not the last. So, for today's video, I, Attorney F, will discuss to you citizenship. So, ano nga ba itong sinasabing citizenship? Pag pakikinggan mo yung word na citizenship, parang alam mo na by heart yung ibig sabihin niya. Pero actually, pag ipa-define sa'yo, parang medyo mahirap siya. But actually, citizenship, it refers to the membership to a political community which entails both rights and duties. So pag sinabi nating political community, ano ba to? Ito yung tinatawag nating state. So that membership to the state, may kasama yung rights and duties. May rights ka sa state, meron ding rights ang state sa'yo. At the same time, meron ka ring obligasyon sa state at meron ding obligasyon ang state sa'yo. But how do we acquire citizenship? Paano ba tayo nagkakaroon ng citizenship? Well, there are three modes of acquiring citizenship. First is jus soli or by place of birth. So, ang basis nito is kung saan ka pinanganak. Second, jus sanguinis. Ang basis naman nito is blood relationship. Blood relationship kanino? Sa nanay mo or sa tatay mo. So, nakukuha mo yung citizenship ng nanay or ng tatay mo. Kaya siya by blood relationship. And lastly, we also have naturalization. Ang naturalization naman, ito yung legal act of adopting an alien to be a member of a particular state. So as to the process of naturalization, we will discuss this further in a separate video. Ngayon, as of the date of posting of this video, kasi, hindi natin ma-predict, pwedeng magbago. So as of the date of posting of this video, between jus soli and jus sanguinis, ano ba ang ina-apply sa Pilipinas? The Philippines adhere to jus sanguinis. Ibig sabihin, kung isa sa mga magulang mo ay Pilipino, kahit saan ka pa pinanganak, ikaw ay isang Pilipino. So kahit pa na ayaw mo maging Pilipino, wala kang choice. Pagkapanganak pa lang sa'yo, Pilipino ka na. Ngayon, sino ba ang citizens of the Philippines? Now, it's not as easy as looking at the current constitution. We have to consider the history. Bakit important ang history? Kasi nagmamatter yung date kung kailan ka pinanganak sa citizenship mo. So later on, you will understand why. So before, itong citizen na term, hindi pa siya ginagamit. Dati, ang tawag sa atin ay Spanish subjects. Paano ko nasabi na ito ang tawag sa atin dati? Kasi ito ang nakalagay sa Philippine Bill 1902. So ito, very clear na ang tawag sa atin ay Spanish subjects. Pero dito din sa Philippine Bill 1902, pinakaunang nakita na ginamit ang word na citizens. Citizens of the Philippine Islands. So under this PB 1902, sino ba ang considered na citizens of the Philippine Islands? So nakalagay dito, ito yung mga nag-reside na Spanish subjects on 11th day of April 1899. So April 11, 1899 and nag-reside sa Pilipinas. So ang nangyari dito is mass naturalization. Mass naturalization kanino? Sa mga lahat ng nag-reside na Spanish subjects on April 11, 1899. And also, nakalagay din dito na their children born subsequent thereto. So if you read the provisions closely, ang ginamit dito is actually hindi siya use sanguinis, but use solis. Kasi the mere fact na pinanganak ka sa Pilipinas. However, meron namang exception dito sa mass naturalization na nangyari. Ito na yung mga they preserve their allegiance to the crown of Spain. So for you to understand it further, I will give you an example. So, kunwari si A, let's say, ano talaga siya, native siya ng Pilipinas. Native siya ng Pilipinas. Tapos, nakapanasawa siya, si B. Ngayon, si B is Espanyol si B. O, diba? Sana all kay A, nakapangasawa ng Espanyol. Okay, so, nung nagpakasal si A at si B, let's say, nangyari yun nung January 1899. Tapos, umalis sila ng Pilipinas at nagpasya silang doon na manirahan sa Spain. Ngayon, considered ba si A na Filipino? So, the answer is no. Kasi ang basis natin dito is kung sino man yung mga Spanish, quote-unquote, Spanish subjects na nag-reside sa Philippines on April 11, 1899. So, tapos na tayo sa Philippine Bill 1902. Now, here comes 1935 Constitution. Well, the 1935 Constitution took effect on November 15, 1935. Again, the dates are very important kasi may effect siya sa citizenship ng tao. Ano ba ang nakalagay sa 1935 Constitution? So, we have Number 1, those who are citizens of the Philippine Islands at the time of the adoption of this Constitution. Now, para malaman natin kung sino yung citizens of the Philippine Islands, nung time na inadopt ang 1935 Constitution, kailangan natin tignan yung mga laws existing at that time. Okay, so first, we have Philippine Bill 1902. So, na-discuss na natin kanina, di ba, kung sino yung mga citizens under Philippine Bill 1902. So, ibig sabihin, kung citizens sila under Philippine Bill 1902, citizens pa rin sila hanggang 1935 Constitution. Next is yung lahat ng covered ng Act 2927 or the Naturalization Law. So, ibig sabihin, lahat ng mga na-naturalize during the adoption of the 1935 Constitution ay considered ding Philippine citizens or Filipino citizens. Next one is yung covered ng Act 3448. So this was actually an amendment to the Act 2927. So ano ba ang nakalagay dito sa amendment? So under Act 3448, you are a Filipino citizen if minor ka nung na-naturalize ang parents mo or pinanganak ka sa Pilipinas after your parents got naturalized. Another provision under Act 3448 is that any woman who is now or may hereafter be married to a citizen of the Philippines and who might herself be lawfully naturalized shall be deemed a citizen of the Philippines. Ibig sabihin, kung nagpakasal ka sa isang citizen ng Pilipinas, pwede ka maging Filipino citizenship under this Act 3448. Now, is it automatic? Automatic ba na kapag nagpakasal ka sa Filipino citizen, ay Pinoy ka na din? So this was answered in the case of Lo Santuang versus Emilio Galang. So the Supreme Court here said that this is not automatic. Hindi porke kasal ka sa Pinoy, ay Pinoy ka na kaagad. The foreign woman should first prove that she has all the qualifications to be a Filipino citizen. So please read the case of Lo Santuang versus Emilio Gala. So I hope I read it right. And lastly, those who were individually declared to be citizens of the Philippines by final court decision. So, take note of the keyword here na final. So, ibig sabihin, kung di pa final yung judicial declaration that you are a Filipino no time na na-adapt ang 1935 Constitution, hindi ka papasok sa citizens of the Philippines under the 1935 Constitution. So next on the list are those born in the Philippine Islands of foreign parents who, before the adoption of the 1937 or 1935 Constitution, had been elected to public office in the Philippine Islands. So, ibig sabihin, kunwari si A, ang both parents niya ay Chinese. Pero, noong 1931, ay na-elect siya as mayor, let's say mayor, sa isa sa mga cities sa Philippines at that time. So, ibig sabihin, meron na siyang Filipino citizenship. Now, diba, remember na sabi ko na usually yung Philippine Bill 1902, but under the 1935 Constitution, we have the jus sanguinis. So, ito yung first time ever na nag-adopt ng jus sanguinis. Bakit jus sanguinis? Kasi because of number 3. Those whose fathers are citizens of the Philippines. Ibig sabihin, the mere fact na ikaw ay anak ng isang Pilipino, ibig sabihin yung tatay mo ay Pilipino, ang basis lang nito is yung blood relationship mo sa tatay mo Pilipino, ikaw na rin ay isang Pilipino. Kaya ito ang first ever na nag-adopt, itong 1935 Constitution, ito ang first ever na nag-adopt ng jus sanguinis. But also note that yung jus sanguinis is limited to the fathers. So itong pagdating naman sa mga nanay, we have number 4. Those whose mothers are citizens of the Philippines and upon reaching the age of majority, elect Philippine citizenship. So unlike sa kapag ang tatay mo ang Pilipino, pag ang nanay mo ang Pilipino, you have to elect pa yung Philippine citizenship. So pagdating sa number 4, let's lay down the foundation first. Who may avail of the benefit of electing Philippine citizenship. Now, it is sufficient that the mother be a Filipino citizen either by birth or by naturalization at that time of marriage. So, ang reckoning period mo nito is yung time na nagpakasal siya. Not your date of birth. So, ibig sabihin, kung nung nagpakasal yung nanay mo ay Pilipino siya, you can avail of number 4. You have to understand na during this time, if a Filipina marries an alien and under the alien's law, the wife acquires his citizenship, a Filipina loses her citizenship. Kaya may mga ganito. Kaya ang basis niya is at the time of marriage kasi may instances na nawawala yung citizenship ng babae. Now, how do you elect Filipino citizenship? So, although the 1935 Constitution was adopted, of course, in 1935, yung procedure ng pag-elect was only in 1941. So, this number 4 was supplemented by CA 625, which took effect on June 7, 1941. So, paano yun? Anong mangyayari between 1935 to 1941 nung time na wala pa itong CA 625? So, nung mga panahon na yun, since wala pang fixed procedure on how you elect your Filipino citizenship, the court has accepted acts such as participating in elections and campaigning for a candidate as an adequate form of election. So, ngayon, ano ba itong sinasabi ng CA 625? So, sabi ng CA 625 na you elect through sworn statement. So you express in that sworn statement before any officer authorized to administer oaths, so ngayon in mga notary public, na you are electing Filipino citizenship, and that will be registered to the nearest civil registry. And also, you will have to take an oath of allegiance to the Philippine Constitution. Okay. Ngayon, merong particular case na sabi ng, kasi may instances na, for example, ang nanay mo nabuntis lang siya ng, let's say, Chinese. Tapos umalis din yung Chinese. Hindi niya pinanagutan yung nanay mo. So ikaw, as an illegitimate child, do you have to elect Filipino citizenship? Do you have to go through that process? So the Supreme Court said in Republic versus Chule E. Lim, the constitutional and statutory requirements of electing Filipino citizenship apply only to legitimate children. These do not apply to those who was considered an illegitimate child. So please take note of that. Ngayon, when do you have to elect your Filipino citizenship? Kailan ba? Ano ba yung time frame? So the Supreme Court said that the reasonable time for person to elect Filipino citizenship is 3 years from the age of majority. Ngayon, nung time na to, the age of majority was 21. But of course, this is still a case-to-case basis. So it will still depend on the factual circumstances surrounding the case kasi hindi naman siya fixed time eh. Ang nakalagay lang is reasonable time. Baka merong justifiable reason bakit hindi siya agad nakapag-elect ng Filipino citizenship. But the general rule is that 3 years from the age of majority. Now, yung naturalization, sabi ko kanina, we will talk about it in a separate video. So, for a time, ito yung ginamit, yung 1935 Constitution. But on January 17, 1973, the 1973 Constitution took effect. Now, a new Constitution means a new provision on citizenship. Now, what did the 1973 Constitution say on citizenship? So, ito yung enumeration ng 1973 Constitution when it comes to citizenship. So, number 1, those who are citizens of the Philippines at the time of the adoption of this Constitution. So, same pa rin sa ganun pa rin sa explanation ng 1935 Constitution. So, ibig sabihin, kung sino yung mga citizen nung time ng 1935 Constitution pa ang in effect, nadala nila hanggang sa 1973 Constitution. Next one, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines. So, the principle of ius sanguinis was preserved in 1973 Constitution. But what's the difference between the 1935 Constitution and the 1973 Constitution? The difference is that same na ang level ng Filipina mothers sa Filipino mothers. Hindi na kailangan yung election. Hindi na kailangan mag-elect if ang nanay mo lang yung Pilipino. Rightfully so. Kasi 'di ba, ang babae naman ang nagbitbit at ang nagluwal sa kanilang mga anak. Now, take note that the condition here is that the mother should be Filipina at the time of the birth. 'Di ba kanina, ang reckoning period mo is yung time ng marriage. But this time, ang period naman na titignan mo is yung time ng birth ng child. So, for example, si A, nag-asawa siya ng Espanyol na si B. Itong si A, Pilipina siya. Si B, okay, sabi ko nga, Espanyol siya. Ngayon, nanganak sila si C. Pero, nung time na nanganak si A, nawala na rin yung citizenship niya. Ibig sabihin nun, si C ay isang Espanyol. Kasi ang titignan mo is yung date of birth. Kung Filipino ba si A nung pinanganak niya si C. Now, is this provision retroactive? Will it apply kung pinanganak ka nung 1935 Constitution? Tapos, let's say, hindi ka pa nakakapag-elect kasi inabutan mo lang yung age of majority mo nung 1975 na yung age of majority mo. Pero pinanganak ka during the effectivity of the 1935 Constitution. Now, the Supreme Court said na this particular provision is not retroactive. It will only apply sa mga pinanganak after naging effective ang 1973 Constitution. So kahit pa na you reach the age of majority during the effectivity of the 1973 Constitution, you still have to elect Filipino citizenship. Kasi this is not retroactive. Okay, so again, let's review muna. I'll give you a situation and you try to guess it. Okay, A was born in January 27, 1973. Her father is Chinese and her mother is a PH citizen at the time of marriage and until A was born. When she reached the age of majority, she did not elect PH citizenship. Is A Filipino? Now, what do you think? The answer is yes. Why? Because A was born after the adoption of the 1973 Constitution. Remember, the 1973 Constitution was adopted when? January 17. Okay, ito siya, pinanganak siya January 27. Ngayon, tinanggal di ba yung requirement ng election for those with Filipino mothers only. Naging automatic na din ang citizenship. But if I change the date to January 7, 1973, the answer would be hindi siya Filipino kasi she was born during the effectivity of the 1935 Constitution. Now, if you remember kanina, di ba sabi ko, a Filipina may lose her citizenship by marrying an alien if by virtue of the law in force in her husband's country, she acquires the citizenship of her husband. So, ibig sabihin, magiging foreigner na siya, mawawala na siya ng Filipino citizenship. However, under Section 2 of 1973 Constitution, yung under sa Article 3 on citizenship, it provides that a female citizen of the Philippines who marries an alien shall retain her Philippine citizenship unless by her act or omission she is deemed under the law to have renounced her citizenship. On how you lose your citizenship, we will talk about that in a different video. Pero for now, ito muna i-focus nyo. So, ibig sabihin nito, under the 1973 Constitution, hindi na nawawala yung Filipino citizenship ng babae pag nagpapakasal siya sa foreigner and under sa batas ng kanyang asawa ay nakukuha niya yung kanyang citizenship. So, ibig sabihin na re-retain na ng mga Filipino women ang kanilang citizenship. Now, let's go back to the remaining enumerations under the 1973 Constitution. So, we have number 3, those who elect Philippine citizenship pursuant to the provisions of the 1935 Constitution. So, this is self-explanatory. And then we have those who are naturalized in accordance with law. So, sabi ko kanina, this will be discussed in a separate video. Now, after the 1973 Constitution, we now have the 1987 Constitution, our current Constitution. So this Constitution took effect on February 2, 1987. So please take note of the dates kasi they are very, very important. Now, under the 1987 Constitution, na-preserve pa rin yung jus sanguinis. Pero you have to understand na yung jus sanguinis, it only applies to natural filiation. Ano ibig sabihin nun? It does not apply to filiation by adoption. It means if A is adopted from the US and her biological parents are, let's say, US citizens, yung pag-adapt kay A ng Filipino parents will not make her a Filipino. What does she have to do? Kailangan pa rin niyang magpa-naturalize. Another thing is that the general rule is only legitimate children follow the citizenship of the father. Bakit? Kasi merong instances na yung illegitimate child, let's say ang tatay niya is Pinoy pero ang nanay niya is foreigner, may times na hindi clear kung yung yung Pinoy ba talaga na tatay ang kanyang tatay. So, ibig sabihin nun, if the paternity is clear, pwedeng i-follow ng illegitimate child yung citizenship ng father. Kasi 'di ba, bakit mo naman siya bibigyan ng Filipino citizenship if in the first place, hindi ka naman talaga sigurado kung yun ba talaga ang tatay niya. So, okay, ibig sabihin, the illegitimate may follow the citizenship of the child if the paternity is clear. Now, how do you say that the paternity is clear? If the child was acknowledged by the father and may ebidensya yung pag-acknowledge niya. For example, signing of the birth certificates or pwede ring other public documents. Or some other ways that the court may deem proper na maging, kumbaga, evidence to prove that the paternity is clear. Ngayon, let's go to the enumeration under Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution. First, those who are citizens of the Philippines at the time of the adoption of the 1987 Constitution. So, okay, alam na natin yan. Hindi porke may bagong Constitution ay nawawala na yung citizenship. As long as at the time the Constitution was adopted, you were still a Filipino. Next, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines. So, this was already discussed and similar with the 1973 Constitution. Third, those born before January 17, 1973, ibig sabihin before the 1973 Constitution of Filipino mothers who elect Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority. So there was confusion on this particular provision. So, merong mga sinasabi na it only applies to those who elected Philippine citizenship after the 1987 Constitution. So, may mga nagsasabi naman na hindi, it also applies even way before pa nangyari yung 1987 Constitution. If let's say, nag-elect siya nung 1973 or 1950, sabi nila, it also applies daw yung itong number 3. Now, this was answered in the case of Cole versus HREP. Now, what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said that applying not only to those who elect Philippine citizenship after February 2, 1987, but also to those who, having born of Filipino mothers, elected citizenship before that date. So, ibig sabihin, it doesn't matter kung kailan mo man inelect yung Filipino citizenship mo. Whether before 1987 or after 1987, it applies to all. So, this provision is intended siya to correct an unfair position which discriminates against Filipino women. Last is those who are naturalized in accordance with law. So this we will discuss later in a separate video. Let's go to Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution. So ano sabi dito sa Section 2? Natural-born citizens are those who are citizens of the Philippines from birth without having to perform any act to acquire or perfect their Philippine citizenship. Those who elect Philippine citizenship in accordance with Paragraph 3, Section 1, or yung mga pinanganak before the 1973 Constitution of Filipino mothers, ito yung sinasabi dito, shall be deemed natural-born citizens. So, dito first na-introduce yung concept of natural-born. Now, itong nakalagay dito, citizens of the Philippines from birth. This was clarified in the case of Poe Liamanzares versus COMELEC. Now, why was there a question as to what from birth means? Kasi sabi ng COMELEC dito, dapat daw yung from birth, it should be continuous from the time you were born up to the present. Dapat uninterrupted yung pagiging Filipino citizen mo. Kasi nga itong si Poe naging American citizen siya at some point. Now, the Supreme Court here clarified na sabi ng Supreme Court, from birth, it means that a person who at the time of his birth is a citizen of a particular country is a natural-born citizen thereof. The Supreme Court said na hindi kailangan continuous. Ibig sabihin, kung Filipino siya pinanganak, then at some point nawala yung pagka-Filipino citizen niya, and then bumalik na naman ulit kasi binalik niya, then he is still considered a natural-born citizen. So, hindi kailangan na tuloy-tuloy yung pagiging Pilipino para makonsider na natural-born. Ang pinaka-importante dito is pinanganak ka na Pilipino. So, nung tayo na pinanganak ka, ikaw ay Pilipino. Now, how about foundlings? Who are foundlings? Now, a foundling, it refers to a deserted or abandoned child or infant with unknown facts of birth and parentage. So, yun yung mga inabandon na infants. Now, are they considered natural-born? Now, this was answered in the case of David versus SET. The Supreme Court here said that the presumption that all foundlings found in the Philippines are born to at least either a Filipino father or a Filipino mother and are thus natural-born unless there is substantial proof otherwise. It arises when one reads the Constitution as a whole so as to effectuate its whole purpose. So, ibig sabihin nito, kung nakita ka dito sa Pilipinas, ang presumption is isa sa mga magulang mo ay Filipino. And that makes you a natural-born. Unless, of course, merong proof na hindi ka talaga dito nahanap either sa Philippines or both parents mo ay hindi Filipino. Now, why is it important? Bakit important tong natural-born? Because there are government positions requiring natural-born citizens. So, kailangan bago ka mapunta dito sa mga posisyon na to, dapat ay ikaw ay isang natural-born. O ano ba yung mga positions na yon? So, we have the President, the Vice President, Senator, Member of the House of the Representatives, Member of the Supreme Court or any lower collegiate court, Chairperson or Commissioners of the CSC, Chairperson and Commissioners of the COE, Chairperson and Commissioners of the COA, Ombudsman and his or her deputies, Board of Governors of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and Chairperson and members of the Commission of Human Rights. So that's why it's very important whether a person is natural-born because, mali mo, di ba? Gusto mo maging presidente or vice president. So kailangan muna ikaw ay isang natural-born. So this ends our discussion for today. And if you have any suggestions or meron kayong remarks, feedbacks, or recommendations, or may gusto kayong topic na i-discuss, you may send it through our email, thelegalloungeph@gmail.com. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.